What I wanted to do, this is going to be a very short video, what I wanted to do is talk about one of the subjects nearest and dearest to my heart, buffing out paint. Now this is the paint on Joe's AGOSTINI helmet, which now is fully cured, and I've always thought it was best to let it dry even an extra day if possible, even though some people don't agree with that. But the first step is I look around for any runs in the paint, any little flaws that still need to be fixed. In this case, because we've done 4 sand outs before this was pretty much ready to be buffed out today. So, because it was snowing and icing outside, I thought I'd get a little jump on this job, and I thought I'd share the little things I've learned about buffing over the years. Now, even though a lot of people think, or they try to do, is just go get a can of rubbing compound at AutoZone and start rubbing on their car, that isn't really going to do much. In fact, a lot of times it takes the shine off the paint. What the proper way of doing it that I've found over many years, actually over 50 years, is you need to take, and this is 2000 grit paper, and if you look real close you can see little flaws. If you paint outside as I do and you don't have a paint booth, well, you're always going to get these little divots in the paint and things from fish eyes and whatever. And that's one of the reasons for buffing it out. Now we used urethane clear on this job. In this case, 2000 grit paper. I've used 2500 grit paper, 2500 grit, but for this job I wanted to use 2000. I'll explain why in a minute. I wanted to start, and it's a very time-consuming job, doing each little part, sanding it flat, wiping it dry, and holding it up to the light. It's what's called candling. Anytime I find a little divot, I see one up here, a little fisheye, a little speck of something, well, yeah, a lot of people are very happy to live with that, and, well, I'm not. So it's just as simple as that. Now luckily, and a lot of people, this kind of slips by them. They think that if they're sanding with 2000 grit paper, it's never going to sand, it's never going to cut. And if you sand with rougher grits, it may go maybe a few percentage, maybe 10% quicker. But 2000 grit really does cut nice. Now, even if you have a little run or a little imperfection or something you need to get out, soapy water, dish soap, a couple of drops of dish soap in some warm water, and just sanding away, dry it with a paper towel. Sand it, dry it with a paper towel. At some point in time, what you're looking for, and the trick is not to ever let it get dry. The water is there to wash away the grit. The soap keeps the grit from sticking to the sandpaper. So in essence what happens is you always have this looks like bubbles or slime or whatever on here. But this is what allows you to not use $100 worth of sandpaper to sand out a helmet. It prolongs the life of the sandpaper infinitely. Now in this case, one of the things we had several decals. Now some of the decals we made, John Pothier, Joe, they got together, I put the clear on them, the big Ago, but there's one decal on here that came from somebody else, and it's a vinyl decal. Vinyl decals are a lot thicker. So what I was looking to compare in the course of this is if I was going to be able to bury that decal. Now this one went on, again, Joe did this one himself. It went on real nice, and in the final product, if you close your eyes and rub your hand on this, you can't even feel it. It's done a nice job of burying itself. This one is a vinyl decal. You don't put this on with water, and what happens, it's a lot thicker. It's 3, 4, 5 times thicker. So you really, in the course of doing this whole job, I've been putting extra clear on this, but I still haven't totally buried it. So I'm going to be very careful sanding around the edges because I don't want to cut through. I want to, at the very end, have a coat of, at least one coat of clear on everything. So this is one of the things that, if you're sanding over vinyl decals, you better have a lot of clear on them. The decals we made are a lot thinner, And in my estimation, one of the things we should have done, and looking back, maybe shame on us for not doing it, we should have made an exact copy of this in the thinner decal material, but it's just one of the things I try to learn from every project so that in the future we can make each one just a little bit better. Now in this case, another thing I did, and I think Joe even liked it, we fogged around the edge of the gold with some black to make it three-dimensional. And in the final product, now that I see it all put together, I think that really makes it stand out and makes it unique. Now Joe made up these decals, and they're MV Augusta. He did them, and the way he did this now, instead of on clear paper, he made it on white paper. And what I was able to do was just leave this really thin white border around it, which blends in, and I think it not only blends in, it even made it just a little bit nicer. But again, I put a lot of extra clear over this, and in the final product, when it was totally done, you can rub your hand over this any dimension you want, and it's buried in the paint. Now the idea is, and another thought is, this is not a model airplane where we're trying to keep it light. In fact, if it was, we'd probably be using different materials. But in this kind of a project, or painting a guitar that has this kind of badging on it, one of the things, you don't want to make the clear any thicker than that. In other words, you don't want to make the clear 1/16 of an inch thick, because what happens as time goes by, it may have a tendency to crack. Modern paints are a ton better than old lacquers and acrylic lacquers and the original enamels, but they're still, if you put them on thick enough, they'll crack. Now, Joe had spent a lot of time with this decal, and we really had trouble getting it on. We really spent a lot of time, in fact. So I was super, super careful in doing the 2000 grit sanding on this, and really went back and forth. Now, one of the tricks is, if you're going to do a decal like this, is to sand everything in one dimension, and do it like a clock. 12 to 6, 1 to 7, 2 to 8, and just go completely around, so you're constantly putting a different angle on the sandpaper. So what it does, by doing that, you get in all the nooks and crannies, and in the final product, what we're looking for is that you can rub your hand over that and you don't feel it. And that's what sets custom work apart from most things that are done on a production line. It's the same way a hand-built car like a Ferrari is a little bit different, the paintwork's a little bit different, than a production line car. It just, when things are done by hand as if time doesn't exist, the quality is just a little bit better, and needless to say, if it's something you're paying for, you pay accordingly. And I was watching, and it's just a side note is, I was watching a how it's done video about how they paint Porsches and Ferraris and various high-end cars. And the really high-end cars, it takes them a week to paint the car. All the various steps that go into the block sanding, and they're all hand buffed. Everyone is buffed exactly the way I'm doing this one, this helmet. Now they may have more modern equipment, maybe more higher skilled people, but it's basically the same thing. And when I've looked at Ferraris, the paintwork on them, one thing about them, it's always perfect. They really are in a class by themselves. And maybe it's just that I don't have enough friends that own Ferraris. Maybe we need to change that. So if you buy one, let me know. But anyway, I wanted to bring this up. Now, most people that want to buff something, let's say it's your car, just to make an example. If you go to AutoZone, and there's basically red compound and white compound. Red is rough and white is fine. And you buy an electric drill with a buffing pad, and you wind up putting swirl marks on everything, and you get frustrated, aggravated, disgusted. And if you're doing a model airplane, you wind up tearing a flap off or breaking something. So the correct way to do this, if you really do want to have something buffed out nice, and I found a lot of products that work real good. Number one, Bob Brookins years ago turned me on to this product. It's 3M Finesse It. This product, if you only have one buffing product in your shop, this would be great. This is like a universal buffing finishing compound. It works good by hand. It works good on a machine. Imperial hand glaze is another thing. Now what I've used this for is just before a show to put a coat of this on by hand. Don't put it on with a machine. And this really leaves a super high gloss for a couple of days. This is more or less, I would guess, this is more appropriate for car shows, airplane shows, whatever. But I did find in the course of doing this, these three products here. Now they're made in Germany, and the place that I buy to paint, Gavin's, had convinced me to spend, this is about $100 for the three tubes. When I bought them, I thought it was the best investment of all time, because these products are in the $30 to $40 a tube range, so they're not a whole lot different. The difference is there's three. This is rough, medium, and fine. And what this does is, once you're done with the 2000 grit paper, you take a dedicated pad that's never had anything on it before, put some of this on, and just run the buffer over the part. What this does, it takes out the scratches from the 2000 grit paper. Then you take that buffing pad off, put a brand new buffing pad on, and keep each buffing pad right with that product. The medium grit really brings up the gloss very quickly, but it leaves little holograms in the paint. If you look at the paint real close, you'll see from certain angles little holograms and reflections, and the final product gets rid of all of that and puts a super high gloss. Once this is done, you're ready for wax. So if you're prone, if you have a high-end car, a model airplane, a motorcycle, investing $100 in these products, I think, is worth it. Now I have these 4 or 5 years already, many years, maybe, I don't know, and I still have material in each one, and I've used them on a regular basis. They're also good for polishing aluminum. I just thought I'd show why we chose to do this today. My backyard is the Siberian tundra. Just to get out to my garage and get the buffing wheel, the buffing wheels were out in the garage, I had to take this trek. You can see the footprints. And I said, why didn't I put my boots on? Bam-ba-da. Anyway, what I do is I keep all my buffing supplies in a dedicated cabinet. I have 4 buffing wheels. I have extra pads for each one. At least 100 microfibers, which, and again, a microfiber should stay with the product you're using. If you're putting carnauba wax on something, it should have that rag should stay with the carnauba wax. And you can see up here, I don't know if you can see this, the carnauba wax, the pad is right underneath it. The polishing compound for different materials, the pad is right underneath it. Now, another trick with microfibers, once they're all pretty much dirty and gritty, you wash them in the wash separately. You don't put them in with the laundry or you'll ruin both the microfiber and the laundry. So what I do with these, I put them in with, just like you would wash a load of laundry, put them right in the dryer and then fold them back up, and you can use them over and over and over. Now the other thing is all the buffing wheels I have their dedicated pads. And each one has some pluses and each one has some minuses. I have a big giant industrial one that's good for doing cars, but it's very hard to handle one-handed. Now this buffing wheel, which you can buy down in Harbor Freight for about $15, and it's orbital. It doesn't go around and around like a circle. It goes in an orbital manner. So it doesn't leave as many, it's not as prone to leave scratches, and it doesn't tear up edges of paint. This one has 2 choices. You can use it as a rotary or an orbital. Again, this one is about $50. Everything is from Harbor Freight. I think I bought my house in Harbor Freight. And while you're there, the pads, and I mark each one. One is for wax, one is for wax prep, and the one that's on there is for buffing. So by having a dedicated pad, and that is the most important thing I think you can learn, because what happens, if you put the rough compound on a pad, and then put the medium, you in essence have something in between. Maybe it'll be okay, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But then if you induce wax into it, or something else, or hand glaze, all of a sudden you've got a concoction. It's like making a soup and throwing a turtle in, and a mouse, and a Luciano's underwear, and whatever. It just doesn't come out. You don't know, and you can never repeat it anyway. But anyway, start with a relatively new pad. This one has only had the rough compound on it. This one has the finer. Now the finer pads are sponges and they Velcro on. The rougher ones, they're terry cloth, microfiber, or in this case wool. And what's nice about this guy, it's easy on your arm. If you're going to buff for 2 or 3 hours like I am today, this guy, to hold him with one hand and hold the part with the other hand, it requires a lot of muscle power. So, but having both of them, I actually have 2 more, and when I'm doing a job like this, I like to have relatively washed and cleaned microfibers. And so by starting this out with the rough compound and a fresh pad, and usually it'll start to look a little bit of shine coming up, but the rough doesn't really impart a beautiful shine. It gets rid of the scratches. And by doing this, and if you do this here nice, and the little guy you can use for almost everything. The downside of this is that it takes the different kind of pads. It doesn't take the Velcro sided pad. And so it's really good to do this because the majority of your work you do is with the rough pad. And then you just finish it up with that heavy duty guy. And when I'm doing this, and believe me, after a couple hours of this doesn't go in 5 minutes. Your arm definitely gets tired, but now when I have something that looks like a shine on there and it's starting to shine, now we're ready for the final, the smoothest of the compounds. Now, there's an adjustment on the back for the speed. I've experimented extensively with making it faster, which seems like it would be a lot better. It works real good fast on a car. The reason is because you can hold it with 2 hands. But if you're doing a small part, I've liked to use speed 3 because I can hold it with 1 hand. Now, I'm not sure everybody could hold this with 1 hand because once it starts vibrating, if it gets out of vibration, well, it's always vibrating. If you're not controlling the vibration, it can really make you crazy. And I've also, from time to time, set up a foot switch if I'm going to do real delicate stuff, so I can hit the foot switch and then I can hold. I just actually, it's to when you stop buffing to when you can shut the switch off that it gets to be a little bit of a pain. Now, looking at this closely, you can see, ooh, it starts to really shine up. Now, the good news is, and anywhere there's a mountaintop and there's a ridge running down this helmet, I don't want to tear all the paint off the mountaintop. I want to go up to the mountaintop and up to the mountaintop. I don't want to just run the buffer over that high ridge. And that's one of the tricks that'll just save you from buffing through. And this imparts, now another thing, it imparts a nice shine, but things never look really shiny in my shop. The reason is, you'll notice I have all fluorescent lights. The reason for fluorescent lights is whenever you're doing any kind of precision work with paint, it shows up every mistake. If I took this out in the sun, you would never see some of the flaws that you can't hide in fluorescent lights. And from the years of doing aeroplanes where they had to be perfect, you could find things, or the opposite were true. You'd sand something out in the backyard and say, wow, it's perfect. You bring it in under fluorescent lights and you'd say, oh my God, got to get back to work. So the final thing is, and I have once it's got a nice gloss and you can spend a lot of time. You can spend hours just buffing. But once it gets to a certain level, it's not going to get any better. What you need to make it absolutely perfect is carnauba wax. And then I have, again, a dedicated pad that has wax only on it. Swap the pads out. When you buy carnauba wax, you look at the tube or the can or the jar, and if the first ingredient is carnauba wax, buy it. Typically $30 for a can or 100% carnauba wax. Some of the things that are watered down carnauba, it's the carnauba wax that you want in the product. So again, we get rid of the prep wax, get the wax pad on there. And now you see, and you really don't see it because again, we can't go outside today. You saw the snow out there. But this really it actually has a feel that's a little bit erotic. Just touching it is nice. And it has a beautiful gloss. You can from here you can see the reflect. You can actually see my reflection, and you can see the lights reflecting and all the little. If I hold my hand up here, you can see my hand, in fact. Again, all the final inspection I do for the final product is fluorescent light. Always fluorescent light. Now, and the only thing, again, I was hesitant. I got this to where you almost can't feel it. And it'll be up to Joe. If he decides he'd like to just run a buffing wheel or do it by hand a little more. But if you pick up an edge, if you go through the clear and hit an edge of that vinyl, it'll ruin it. So I'll leave that final decision to Joe. And it really does look pretty nice. And the bad thing is, with the way I shoot these videos, you don't really get to see. The colors aren't really perfect, or in this case, the green isn't as green as it normally would be. But in the overall thing, this is going to be a unique. You'll never run into anybody who has the same exact helmet. And I think the quality of the paintwork is going to be superb. It's definitely, no matter what, it's going to stand out in a crowd, that's for sure. Now, another trick, and I know most people don't do this, but I do. When I pull up to a place where there's a bunch of motorcycles and everybody takes their jackets off and gloves, I always put my helmet on the ground. If it's on the ground, it can't fall. When you put it on a mirror or on the seat is the worst. And you got these clumsy gorillas walking by your bike, and somebody tips it, and there goes your helmet, chip, 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 chip. Well, again, the gloss on this one is absolutely spectacular in the front. Joe, all the time you put into this, and John Pothier, of course, with all the little tricks. And I just laid these on so you could see what this would look like. I buffed these by hand. This is just ready. We're actually ready for the assembly now. This, next session we're going to have. This decal is just really, I think this is just something pretty special. And the best part of all of this, the best part is, you have got something that to me is very valuable. You have something that nobody else has. And let's face the fact, the whole reason for buying a high-end bike is, one of the reasons is you want to have something unique. You want to have something nobody else has. And if you wanted to have, something that everybody else has, well, you just go to the store and buy one. But when you got something you have to make or build, and my motto has recently become built, not bought. And that always proves true when we have a bike gathering. You go to the gathering and you see all the bikes you can buy in a store. People kind of, yeah, look at that. Wow, you spent 20 grand, and they walk by. And then somebody comes out with something unique, no matter what it is. If it's one of a kind, or it isn't a very common bike, people tend to pay more attention to it. Anyway, I hope those little buffing tips were of some value. And if they are, pass it on to your friends. There's a lot of other videos, by the way, on this Windy U channel. You got to put the space. It's Windy space U. There's things on there of other painting tips and going the Yamaha paint jobs and stuff, but I think these buffing tips will be of value to a lot of people. So thanks for watching.